Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so thrilled today to be joined by Shazad Latif, who is currently starring in the movie Profile. And I wanted to ask you about a lot of the materials that you had access to in researching and discovering this character, because it is based on a true story, and we have the book that it was based on. And so you were able to see a lot of conversations verbatim, and the script itself also really took a lot of that dialogue very specifically into the pages. And so how did all of that really help your research process and understanding who this character was and developing him?
I mean, it's the kind of dream when you're doing it, especially a true story, that you have that kind of access. And it gave us so much. And Olga, the producer, had done the most insane amount of research, more than like a complete journalist. She's just had it was a folder she had on everything. But yeah, if having the verbatim words of what they said to each other, there's so like 5 key sort of Skype conversations that you see in the book, I think, around that. And that just shows you, informs you so much of how they spoke to each other, how the sort of seduction took place, what their sort of plays were. And so that's just a great place to even, to begin. And then I saw the other main thing was the 2 videos of the actual guy. And seeing that kind of footage, which we reenacted one of the scenes where he's sort of looking at the gun, and just seeing that kind of stuff and how he holds himself and the sort of his mannerism basically is just key. It's just key to sort of hooking into something that you can sort of build from. And they were the 2 main things. And then from then on, it was sort of using that and then creating with Valine our sort of own characters, moving it to London, and then, writing little scenes ourselves to give it a bit more backstory, and then sort of improvising. And it was just, true sort of collaborative filmmaking experience. And Timur, the director, gave us so much confidence. And once you get that confidence as an actor, it's sort of no looking back. It's sort of a dream experience, really.
And with those videos that you were just mentioning, what were some of the key mannerisms and aspects of his personality that you took from watching those?
I felt it was seeing one of those videos, and they're quite short. It was just him in a car looking at a gun, one of them. And it just, that sort of danger mixed with childlike sensibility. So that sort of almost teenage boy kind of excitement mixed with, this is a killer. And so just that was sort of the main thing I took away from that, I think. And that was sort of the hook in of that childishness. And that sort of made you makes the audience, and it makes Val's character sort of want to hang out with him. This guy, you actually end up doing quite fun things. Or you're watching him play football, you're watching him cook together, you're watching him, and you go, oh, this is sort of relatable, and you sort of understand it. And he's excited, he's near cats and all this kind of stuff. And that sort of was the main thing, I think, because if you sort of buy into that, then you're sort of shocked with what happened in the story, I think.
Right, because he has to have a charisma, not even to just make a connection with someone and talking to them on the internet. He has to literally be able to convince someone to drop everything in their life and completely change everything and come abroad where they don't know anyone. And so how are you really leaning into the idea of that level of charisma and connection that he would have had to create and concoct?
Yeah, I think the main thing, Anna was saying, I mean, even Anna said she did fall for this guy, because it's even hard to understand it when you start to go, well, how is anyone going to go over that? What are you talking about? No one's going to go over that. She's a journalist, she's very intelligent, but she sort of fell for the guy. So it was just leaning into that, going into that, exactly what you're saying, trying to be a fun, almost be a fun guy. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's just drawing her in, and that's down to sort of all those components I've just mentioned, yeah.
And there are aspects of his backstory and his family that we get within the script. And, some of it seems like it was definitely true, because how they figured out who he was partly through him mentioning his brother. And then, Forces then looking into that. But did you subscribe to everything that he was saying in respect to his family and his upbringing as being the truth? Or did you think that he was blurring the lines a little bit?
I think, well, that's the thing. I think the best thing we do is sort of leave, any sort of thriller or psychological thriller, you leave most of it, or horror, you're leaving most of the ideas up to the audience, so that you don't know when he's telling the truth. And the same for Val, because they're both playing this game, they're both playing characters, and there's some truth into what this is. So it's just, any line can be a change. So whatever line you want to believe or not want to believe, you're sort of creating this whole story in your head. And so that compact, getting those layers is sort of a crazy thing when you're trying to look at a script or trying to understand, all right, what am I doing in this scene? But wait, is he being serious here? Oh, wait, but when he's telling that candy story, is he being real? But oh yeah, he does really miss that guy at the shop. There's so many sort of things to try and, as an actor, do, and then for Timur to piece together as the filmmaker, and then for the audience to put together. So yeah, it's a bit of a mind fuck, but yeah.
But it's an amazing challenge to have as an actor, because with everything that you're saying, there's literally subtext behind every single line of dialogue that you're able to build in through a lot of layering. And so how was that a really unique challenge in trying to figure out, exactly what you were saying, the subtext and the truth behind every single line?
Well, I suppose normally you're just dealing with two people trying to do something to each other. But in this, like I was saying, this one, they're both playing roles. So you're playing two people. So it's what you're doing and then what you really think. And then, so that's just general good drama anyway. That goes back to, Chekhov or Shakespeare or any of that stuff. It's just those standard sort of dramatic things. And then remembering, wait, this actually did happen. So there's people doing this. And then it goes back to what you're trying to, the whole story of journalism and our digital profiles, who we are online, our relationship to technology and how we behave and why. And I remember Timur saying at one point, why are we more open with these computers than with the people in our lives? I know 20 people in my life are more open on Instagram than they are to me, and they're close friends of mine. So it's just, that's the sort of key, understanding that sort of, that's why it's so interesting, I think, and so current.
Yeah. And you just brought up the idea of a digital profile as well. And even though we mostly see it through her perspective, we do see some aspects, we see some of the messages that they exchange beforehand. And that's actually the first time that we're introduced to him as a character. It's not your performance, it's some of the messages coming through. So what are the ways in which you would look at, those tiny details of his digital profile, some of the messages that he was sending, and how did that help you to shape him as a character for when you bring him on screen that first time?
I think that's down to Timur, and that's just good filmmaking, that you don't actually see me for 20 minutes of the film. I think about 20 minutes or something like that, which is classic sort of suspenseful, the build up to that main sort of Skype ring with the lion, which is now sort of, gives me PTSD every time I hear it. But like, that's just good filmmaking, building up that character and just drip feeding little moments of who this guy might be, and the audience starts to go, what's he going to look like? Who's he going to be? What's he going to be? And then you see it and you're like, oh, or, whatever your reaction is. And I think that's just sort of more down to Timur, that kind of thing. But yeah, any sort of messages they had, or any the pictures with the cats, or piecing together what he would put on his profile, or and you don't see the rest of it all behind. You hear mumbles in Arabic or something else, and yeah. So it's sort of like showing overtly what he does, and then sort of just adding little bits of mystery. It's the mystery is the sort of key moment, I think, for the suspense.
And we see on the other end, we see a lot of messages being typed and then maybe not sent or edited and changed. And that's the way that we all type a lot of messages and communicate. It's that classic 3 dots at the bottom of an iPhone when you're waiting for someone to text you back. And were you creating and concocting the idea that he would be doing the same sometimes and kind of re-editing himself to create the final version of what he was sending at all?
Yeah, I suppose there's always that thing, but I think because he's more trained he doesn't know that Bao's a journalist, but he would generally think he's more trained than who he's speaking to. So he's probably more certain in what he does. But then as it goes on, as he does get slightly drawn in by this woman, then it does get more confusing him, and the lines get blurred. So maybe he would take longer to respond, or does want to call her more and tilt to her more, because she reminds him of home, and no matter where you are, no matter how extreme you've gone, when someone does bring you back to that sort of home state, it would wake him up a little bit, or jolt him in a way out of his normal routine. So yeah.
And how much did you want to concoct for his backstory and his trajectory, and what took him from his hometown of London over to Syria to be involved in this group?
Yeah, well, I think that's very personal for me as an actor. Those kind of little journeys, they're my little notebook things, and I like to just keep that to myself. But yeah, I mean, obviously we didn't want to make him a 2D. The whole point is not to make him a 2D guy who's just gone over there and he's a bad man. The whole point is to sort of humanize these people. And there's my friend who's a journalist, he's speaking to Shamima Begum's teacher, these kind of things. She was never interviewed. There are reasons, and it's good to always do the research and understand why. There's always a story. There's a story in every single person on this planet. So it's you have to dig into that. Otherwise the story won't work. If we didn't make him sort of slightly 3-dimensional, then it won't work.
Yeah. And this might be a question that you can't necessarily answer, but did you feel like at any point he started to get suspicious of her and was almost pushing the limits and testing her? Or did you feel that he genuinely believed everything that she was sharing with him throughout all of their conversations?
I think by the end there's there's suspicions. There's something. I think because it shows when he says in Arabic, we can do this, we can do that. I think by the end he sort of clocks on, but I think it's blurred. I think the whole thing is the whole thing is unsure. That's the sort of beauty of it. I don't want to pinpoint anything because I want the audiences to make up their own sort of mind. Yeah.
And in working with Valine, you obviously weren't filming the scenes together in the same room, which is a really unique experience as performers and actors to do an entire movie that way. But you did have about a week together in a hotel room to really rehearse and play those scenes directly and to figure out a lot of the nuances with your performances. And what were the most valuable things that came out of that time that you were able to spend together in shaping that dynamic between the two of them?
I think it was just breaking down the script, like going back to sort of text work when you're, as an actor, just sort of getting a script and sitting with a partner in a little hotel room it's in Green Park, the Athenaeum, great little hotel, in a dark room, and just sort of the classic sort of actory stuff, and just asking those questions and what are we doing to each other in the scene, right? What happened here? Just asking what, where, why, when, who, those classic sort of 5W questions, and that's just what the sort of early work you need to do, really. But yeah, we're relocating the whole book from France to London. So that was a big thing, sort of, especially me giving the sort of London slang to my character. All of that's just the way he spoke, because, he wouldn't have spoke like that. And just things like that. There was so many things like that to do, which was very fun. And it sort of just held us in good stead for the next 9 days, which we shot the whole film, 6 days Cyprus, 3 days Bethnal Green and Hackney. And then just, filming all on Skype. But they spoke like that. They were speaking on Skype anyway, so what we were doing was just reenacting how they spoke. So it needed to be that way otherwise. But yeah, strange not to be in the same room with someone. Yeah, very weird.
That's incredibly phenomenal that you shot the film so quickly. Did you find that there was time to kind of play around with scenes in the moment, or did you find that you just had to make very quick creative choices from the speed in which you were shooting?
I think weirdly we had a lot of time because we were our own DOPs and with the cameras, and that was all set up. So there was no lighting setups. So basically we have a whole day just to sort of mess around, really. So in acting terms, it gave us a lot of freedom. Then you have, the earpiece in, get on the screen with Timur. He says, why don't you try this? Yeah. Or can I try this? Yeah. And you have a lot more takes really in actual fact, which was very strange because, once you've got the camera, it's go, So it's kind of very unique in that sense, guerrilla filmmaking in a way, and just out there, do some takes, and then me and Val would discuss as well. What are you saying? Yeah, we sort of screaming over Skype. What? All right, let's try it. Go. All right, and then okay, and that was it.
So you just mentioned Timur kind of talking to you through an earpiece. So was he in the room with you when you were shooting a lot of the scenes, or was
he was mainly he was back in London with Val in their sort of setup there, and I was out with the hair and makeup and my beard lady, and we just flew over to Cyprus and then had some sort of Cyprus crew there helping us out, and that was it really. So we sort of got to run things over there. I felt we had our own little unit out there.
What was the adjustment that you found for you as an actor in how you had to approach acting technique with everything that you're saying, where you weren't in the room with Val, but at the same time it is this really intimate two-hander with each of you?
Well, I think in essence, it's all the same. It's like we're talking now. We still feel like, in a way, it's just a different type of connection. It's through a different medium. Yes, there's not a general buzz or an energy, but if that's the way they spoke in real life, then whatever happened to them is happening to us. It's realistic in those terms. But when you're in the internet cafe, it's just being her. It felt very intimate. It's like there's a little wooden block around you, and you're just talking to the screen and yeah, just talking. It's just a new way of communication, isn't it? I suppose it's the next evolution of our way of how we interact with technology. It's just a new phase. It's still as real and it's not as first place energy. It's not like the theater or anything like. It's not like that, but it's still very real. Yeah.
But even beyond it being a new form of communication, as a performer, it goes against all of your intrinsic nature to break the fourth wall, and not just to break it once or twice, but to break it for the entire film and be delivering your entire performance to camera. So did you find yourself having to think about that side of things differently at all?
Well, I always found it easy. I always think it's when I'm on a set, when I look in the camera, it sort of calms me down because I know it's there. And if I can do something to the camera and look right in the lens, I kind of like that, looking right into this deep lens. So I always find that breaking the fourth wall, it just sort of frees you up a little bit. So this way, I was just sort of, you're not even acknowledging the camera because you are talking to the camera. So it's not as scary as it can be, if you just see, if a camera is just sort of tracking past you and you sort of know, and you're like, oh fuck, that this way it's more. You're just talking direct, so it's sort of it frees you up, I think.
Oh, interesting. And especially because you were mentioning how, you were essentially the cinematographer as well for all of your scenes. Did you work with Timur in advance a lot to figure out what that was going to look like and kind of what some of the framing was going to be? Or did he really want it to just be more of a naturalistic, however you feel like you would be holding the phone or, talking to your computer at the time?
Yeah, I mean, Timur's just great at just giving us choices and comments, but then he'll just say, it was more like, making sure things are in frame and then trying different angles and trying he didn't have a super plan of how he wanted the shot, we'd already know, you sort of work within the environment you're in, which is beautiful filmmaking, really. Once you get into a little car or how are you going to hold it out the car, or, you move on the go, and that's quite a nice creative, quick, like you were saying, quick creative decisions and quick creative choices. That's sort of, the beauty of that kind of filmmaking, really. But yeah, you always got Timur there. You always felt safe because he could always suggest something, because he's always thinking. Even when we were on a Zoom the other day, and you could just see him. He's always doing something else. There's always a start typing, or you just see his eyes going. He's thinking of this next great idea or whatever it may be. But yeah, genius.
He was secretly recording the screen the whole time, and making a script in the background.
Exactly.
And, beyond the rehearsal time with Valine, how were you working with Timur in terms of character development before you even got to the rehearsal process? And what were some of the ways in which he really helped you to understand exactly what it was that he was aiming for with the voice and the tone of this movie?
I think he had his own, ideas and stuff from before, the initial casting process. And that's, I think he got a lot from that, because the initial casting thing was unlike anything I'd ever had before. It came through and it was like, all right, you're going to do a 5-minute improvised monologue. And it was just a vague character description of someone very charismatic, almost like a cult leader or something like that. So it wasn't really specific to our storyline. So then it was like, okay, and that was interesting anyway. But I think he got a lot of sense of what he needed from his actor from that. So I sent that in, and then we did a Skype audition. So then we also got that sense. But yeah, and then leaving up to me and Val to sort of, because we were transferring it to London, I suppose I was the key sort of thing on that, because Val's Irish and Timur's from Russia, so I was sort of the London expert, so it was quite easy for me. But yeah, and he gave us that sort of freedom, and then again working with Olga and him and using Brit script, and then everyone putting their own pieces in. Really, it sort of just happens all so quickly. You don't really have time to know how it happened. It just happens. It's one of them.
And it sounds like that freedom really transferred over even when you were filming, that you had a lot of opportunity, to work with the script, but also to find organic moments. And what were some of those organic moments that you had the opportunity to discover?
The writing, I remember one of the nights on the rehearsal, Olga was like, go home and write a scene about something. And we all both went home and wrote. And so I wrote the candy shop scene. It just came out. I was like, okay. And that was, writing a scene in a movie is so rare. That kind of, you don't really get the opportunity to do that often. And that was and I'm suddenly, wait, my whole monologue is going to be in a movie. Great. That's a very beautiful experience for an actor. The curry scene, they were like, why don't they cook? Because they actually did this. They did a lot of research on what these recruiters do, and, cooking together bonds you and the sort of target. And so this whole scene where we were cooking together, that was all improvised. And there's a scene where I show her around the house. Timur was like, just go and show her around this mansion. And I was like, okay. And so then, action. And then you're just walking around and showing her each room, and it's that kind of improv where you go, you're right, this is great, this is back to proper acting.
And off the back of you just mentioning, some of the research around what recruiters do, how deep did you go into looking into that, and what were the most useful places for you to look for information to understand it beyond even just the verbatim of this specific story?
We had Olga, this super producer, who had basically, if you look at her laptop, she would probably be on MI5's watch list or whatever. She had so much information that it was very easy for me and Val to just go, here's a folder, here, look at this, why don't you look at that? Oh, what's that? Yeah, we've got that, don't worry. That's any idea we had, she'd already thought of. So it was one of those extreme. And then we have our book, and then we have the video, and then we have your own creation, then you have you in a room just figuring out what you're going to do. So it was all there for us to sort of do.
And the film takes place around 2014, which isn't that long ago, but when you think about technological advancements, like, it's so different now. We're not communicating via pixelated Skype, which drops the call every 5 minutes, for example. You can just pick up your cell phone and get exactly that same thing. And so what are some of the ways in which you and Val were thinking specifically about communication at that specific point in time?
Well, Timur wanted that thing. He said, look, if it goes pixelated or if the sound cuts out, it doesn't matter. Call back. We want to just keep it very realistic, because it would have happened like that. It would have cut out. It would have, and just to keep those real things adds a little thing. Because there's a whole, when you first see me, the first scene, I remember we finished filming and I was like, wait, that felt a bit fuzzy. Are we going to keep that? And he was like, look, don't worry. And then you see it in the movie. The first time you see him, I think it goes a bit fuzzy for a bit. And there's a brilliant moment where it adds, the first time you see him, it's still a bit fuzzy. You're like, wait, what's going on? Who's that? And then you see him, So those moments are sort of happy accidents of art, really, that you want to keep in.
I also wanted to ask you quickly about the beginning of your career and jumping into working on spooks, because you had been studying acting, I think was at the Bristol Old Vic for about a year and a half, and then left early to go to spooks. But in being able to study, that obviously gave you a place of freedom to fail and to really just try anything. And so then when you stepped onto your first professional jobs, how did that really help you in finding your feet within a professional industry, having had that space of experimentation beforehand?
Well, I mean, because I only did a year and a half, I suppose I wasn't there for the full 3 years. So maybe I did, I was sort of overconfident going into my first job. I hated my acting that I was doing the first job. You always hate I don't know. I didn't think I was very good then, but I think I've got better as it's gone along. I mean, yeah, any sort of place like that, it's just, it just helps with what you're trying to do. It's just, yeah, exactly that, a place you can fail. I feel like it's sort of, when you were young, when we were 13 making movies with our friends, that was a place to fail. You sort of learn from that and stuff, and it's just it's a lovely place to study. Bristol is such a beautiful little town. It's just, you buy this big white house next to the countryside. It's just, you meet great people there, like-minded, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I only did a year and a half, so I didn't get the full experience. But yeah, I missed the horrors of the third year. But yeah, I heard all about them.
And what do you feel for yourself are the biggest differences in your craft and the way that you approach your work at this point in your career versus looking back to those first couple of jobs?
I think the idea of knowing, you just sort of get comfortable with who you are, and you sort of forget about all your idols, and then you become your own sort of, inspiration and believe in your own creation and own selves. And, when you're, actually, my friend sent me a letter yesterday to an actor we wrote when we were 21. We were like buzzing acting students. We'd written, left it at stage door. And it's that kind of thing, it's sort of going and just getting confident and comfortable and experience and just little things you learn on the job and yeah, getting used to the camera, all those kind of things and enjoying it. I think about a couple of years ago, there was a job where I suddenly had that feeling of I'm enjoying going to set. I get really excited. I made myself excited to go to set when they knock on the door, rather than it being a fearful, oh my God, I've got to go and impress people. There was a moment of change where it just clicked, and now I feel sort of coming into my prime, and it's exciting.
And in making Profile, what were the biggest learning curves and challenges for you in making that specific project?
Well, I think, yeah, after that first week of rehearsal, knowing that it was going to be a lot of improv and writing and all that, then suddenly, yes, fear struck, and it was like, oh my God, this is actually it. They're going to want me to just do all this. And it was just me and her. So there was other characters in the movie, but mainly it's a two-hander, and it was a lot of speaking. It's a lot of stuff to do in the movie. So yeah, I think just overcoming that and becoming confident in once you know the character, that you can go into these places and once you stay in that zone, it's quite a beautiful place to be. It's the position, it's where we are when we're 0 to 7, that imaginary world, going back into that place, and you stay there, and you can be very creative, and it's weirdly a safe space, and a fun place and a dark place, and it's sort of everything, I can't really explain it. I'll put my finger on what I'm trying to say, but the imaginary world can be very fun.
Well, it's a really wonderful performance, and congratulations on everything. And thank you so much, Shazad.
Thank you very much.